Now, South Africa is gradually pulling its troops out of eastern DRC, where they were part of an SADC peacekeeping mission fighting rebel groups like M23. Now, the withdrawal follows heavy casualties and the rebels' capture of key cities. But with the region facing growing instability and, humanitarian crises, the future now depends on fragile peace talks. Can diplomacy fill the void left by departing soldiers? Now, Defense Minister Angie Motshekga and SANDF top brass briefed the media on the troops' withdrawal in Pretoria on Sunday. Take a listen.
Withdrawal of the Southern Defence Force from the Eastern DRC marks a very important new chapter in regional peacekeeping efforts. And this withdrawal is a structured process designed to ensure that safe return of both our troops and equipment is not compromised. So all logistical support will continue during this phase.
Withdrawal is a persuasion of the political effort to see that there is peace and stability in the Eastern DRC, and therefore are withdrawing with that pride to say there is an element of peace because M23 committed to the cessation of hostilities. DRC had to sign also an undertaking with M23. So we are withdrawing now in a phased manner, going to the assembly area that we have identified.
Well, to discuss further on this, I'm joined by Kobus Marais. He's an independent defense analyst in South Africa, Johannesburg. And we also have Guy Martin, an editor, Defense Web in Johannesburg, South Africa as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation.
Good evening.
All right, so let me begin with you, Kobus. The SADC mission in Eastern DRC officially ended in March after intense clashes that cost the lives of 14 South African and 3 Malawian soldiers. Now, how do you assess a mission that paid such a heavy price, yet ultimately couldn't halt the M23 advances?
Yes, good evening. I think we started the wrong way, this mission. Remember, there is a vast difference between the SAMI DRC mission and the MONUSCO mission, which is still in the Eastern DRC active. I believe that the whole way of how they have designed and described the mandate of the SAMI DRC mission, and then the lack of proper support in terms of the necessary resources, logistical support, air support in terms of medivacs, evacs, and replenishment of whether it's ammunition or food or whatever is necessary. I think that is where they have failed, because there's no way that the Defence Force was able to send in support to support our soldiers and to do replenishments and to especially do medivacs. So they have started the wrong way, because I believe there was never a justification for the SAMI DRC mission. We are still waiting to hear what was the actual motivation, not the frivolous and the spinning of what they're doing, but what was the actual purpose of our soldiers in the SAMI as part of SAMI DRC. We couldn't afford it. We certainly never had the necessary resources and the ammunition and the air support to make this a just cause. And with all due respect, this is a matter of primarily the Eastern African countries bordering the DRC, and it's not a mission for SADC, especially South Africa, which is the most southern member of the DRC. And in the same time, even the SADC neighbors, especially Angola and Zambia, they were not involved at all in this mission. And one would expect that if there are threats, real threats, then they would be the first ones to get involved and to stabilize that region. So I think we started off totally incorrect. And then the whole discipline and mandate of the SAMI DRC compared to the MONUSCO deployments, I think has put us on the back foot, and they have clearly underestimated the role of the M23s and the Rwandan Defense Force. And yes, they were very clearly, very early put in an enormous predicament, and that's why we have lost more soldiers under the SAMI DRC deployment than we have over the long and years deployment as part of MONUSCO.
All right. So let's hear, from Guy. Guy, in your view, was ending the mandate inevitable, or do you think that SADC could have recalibrated and reinforced the mission instead? Because, one of the challenges that Kobus mentioned was lack of support. And, we know that the troops were confined to their bases and, lacked logistical support. So how do operational shortcomings or challenges like these impact a mission's effectiveness?
Well, I think the mission failed because there was no adequate support. There weren't enough troops deployed. The mission was supposed to have about 5,000 troops, but I think only about half of that number eventually deployed. Now, if you look at the United Nations mission in the DRC, at their height, they had about 15 to 20,000 troops. And with that strength, they still couldn't bring complete peace to the DRC. So there's no way that less than 5,000 troops would be able to do the same thing. And especially when those troops did not have attack helicopters, air support. And in the last sort of 10 years, the DRC government, their military has not grown particularly stronger, whereas the M23, they've been supplied with increasingly sophisticated weaponry from Rwanda, including electronic warfare systems, surface-to-air missiles, and so forth. So while the South African military has been on the decline, the M23 has been getting stronger and stronger. So I think while the mandate of SAMI DRC was a good mandate, they just did not have the resources to get the job done. And as a result, we've seen the fall of Sake, Goma, many other towns in North and South Kivu have been taken by the M23 rebels. They still control all that territory. And in spite of the peace talks currently underway, there's still fighting going on. So the SAMI DRC mission was, I'll say, an abject failure. It did not bring peace to the region. It did not stop conflict. It did not protect civilians. Thousands of civilians were killed in the battle for Goma. Millions are displaced. And there's not much of an end in sight. I think the DRC government, they had to go to the negotiating table after the fall of Goma and the end of the SAMI DRC mandate. But this is far from over, and the territory that's controlled by the M23, it still continues to expand.
Well, Guy, you did say that, this peacekeeping did not bring peace, did not stop conflict, did not protect civilians, and it was a complete failure. Now, since you also talked about, the M23 rebels controlling, major cities, Goma and Bukavu, to be precise, do you think that, phasing the withdrawal, that's the military withdrawal, will avoid creating a security vacuum? Guy?
Yes, I definitely think there will be a security vacuum, although it's not to say that the presence of SAMI DRC troops is really keeping much of a lid on things. There's been reports of M23 fighters arbitrarily arresting people, executions. There's been reports of rape, looting, and lots of other crimes. But with the SADC forces departing, that's definitely not going to be good for the civilians in those areas. So I do think there will be a bit of a security vacuum, and I don't think the United Nations is able to really fill that. As you will recall, the DRC government has been pushing for the United Nations to leave the country. Now that process, they started withdrawing, but that process has sort of slowed down as the M23 has been advancing. But nevertheless, the United Nations, I don't think, is strong enough to or able to fill that security vacuum. So I think everything rests on the current peace talks and negotiations with Rwanda, which is the backer of M23. So I think that's the only sort of hope for real peace in the DRC.
All right, now let's.
Can I maybe just mention and add to that?
Yeah,
remember the time when the M23s got the upper hand against our soldiers and the Sami DRC contingents? That is when they have already filled that vacuum, and that's why they got total control of Goma and that vast areas, and that's why they were able to contain our soldiers within their camps. So that vacuum has already was already happening at that time, and they've already filled that vacuum. So the political challenge is how to really disarm them and how to get them to withdraw. And then the question would be, so what would replace that vacuum left by the M23s to obviously not allow them to just move back subsequent to a peaceful negotiation?
All right, now speaking of what might replace the vacuum, now Guy did say that, we're dependent on the peace talks at the moment, and, this particular peace talk is supported by Qatar and the US. It is still ongoing, but looking at the failures of this particular mission, do you think that confidence should be placed in diplomatic efforts, actually delivering stability? This is for you, Kobus, for you, yeah.
Yes. Remember, this war and the conflict, in my opinion, there was never a chance that it would have been settled through the barrel of a gun. And that's why I have said for many, and for a long time, for many years actually, to say that the option is not for SADC to be deployed and to play the big brother. Because it is neighbors that is in this conflict involved, and many of the neighbors are hosting, apparently, allegedly, these various rebel groups, because it's not only the M23s. There's about 100 smaller rebel groups active on that whole eastern border of the DRC. The only way it can be solved is through diplomatic and political discussions and negotiations around the table. And specifically, because remember, up till beginning of this year, the Eastern African Community bloc was to a very lesser extent involved. So they must be involved. I've always said they must be involved under the guidance of the African Union and the United Nations. So at least what we have achieved is that the two neighbors, specifically Rwanda and the DRC, have started to talk to each other, and that is a good thing. One must just remember the Eastern DRC is a mineral and natural resource rich region. It's a region where countries like the United States obviously want to get involved there and wants to benefit from that rich minerals and natural resources. The moment that agreement between the two will come into effect, one must expect that you might see American soldiers or private military groups, becoming involved and trying to safeguard that region. At least what I know is there's no direct benefit of South Africa in the Eastern DRC. I'm not talking about individuals who might have interest in the mining sector and the mineral sector. We talk about a country, and I think once you have that, but what we anyway are requiring is a peaceful negotiations, a settlement between the neighbors of the DRC and the DRC, so that whatever happens in that lake region, where in terms of economic and job creation, that there can be a proper cooperation between those countries. Because if you can't stop it now, it will never stop. because there are too many people who are benefiting from the rich minerals and resources of that country. So I suspect that will happen, and I think that will the kind of commitment be that countries like America will probably provide the DRC, whether it will just be in terms of training, or whether it will be in terms of actual deployments, whether it will be military equipment, that one will have to see as time goes by.
Well, we'll see what happens as time goes by, indeed. Now, back to you, Guy. Some critics actually say that the SADC forces were undermined by unclear rules of engagement. Now, do you believe that senior commanders equipped their troops properly for combat against a well-armed rebel group like M23, like the M23?
No, I don't think rules of engagement were a problem. I think the lack of capacity was a big issue. So not just on the part of the SAMI-DRC forces, but also on the part of the DRC government forces. The whole point of SAMI-DRC was to assist the DRC in bringing peace and curbing armed groups and so forth. But when the M23 attacked Goma, the DRC government forces basically melted away. I've heard reports that some of the government tanks only had several rounds of ammunition for their main guns. A lot of the worst or the most poorly trained DRC government troops were sent to Goma, while the better troops and equipment was kept back in the capital. So when the M23 attacked, the government forces, they quickly melted away, surrendered, changed into civilian clothes and fled, which left a completely under-equipped and far too small SAMI-DRC force to fight back on against the rebels. So I think that was the main issue, and the fact that there was no air support. It's something that I keep coming back to, but I think would have been a game changer if there were aircraft involved. If you look at back in 2012 when the M23 first took Goma, a year later, attack negotiating table and withdrew from Goma. But this time around, there was no air support from anyone. Not South Africa, not Tanzania, and not Malawi. Now, if you look at this SADC, there are 16 countries that make it up, but only 3 of those countries decided to contribute equipment and troops to the SAMI-DRC mission. So what we see is that the neighbors in the region, they weren't all committed to this process. Angola, which has a much larger air force, they didn't come to the table. So there wasn't much commitment from the DRC's neighbors. And I can understand why, because if you look at what Felix Tshisekedi's approach has been, he's been very reluctant to negotiate with the M23. And in a way, the fall of Goma was a good thing in that it forced the DRC government to the negotiating table. Up until then, he was trying different options. First the UN, then an East African community force, then the SAMI-DRC force. And now that all of those options have been exhausted, the only thing is to go to the negotiating table. So that's the only sort of silver lining to this disaster, is that the DRC government has got no other option but to talk. They can't really fight this out. Yeah. So maybe it will bring peace sooner than we think.
All right, now let's touch on a little bit of politics. This is for you, Kobus. The DRC says it is seeking to prosecute Kabila for alleged support of the M23 insurgency. Can you share with us your opinion on the implications of the DRC's government's move to lift the former president's, immunity over alleged war crimes, especially in context of the current conflict?
Well, I think it will be the wrong thing at the moment to put that as a priority to the DRC. Whatever they need to do in terms of international law and criminal law, that is fine. That must follow its route. But I think timing is everything. So the DRC would make a huge mistake to currently try to prosecute him while this is in a very, very sensitive state. Now, if those allegations are at any way true or partly true, then one can expect that there would be sympathy for him from Eastern African countries, and especially Rwanda. Now, seeing that Rwanda is a major player in this whole environment to find a lasting solutions, it will obviously be wrong. And I think there's a time for everything, and much of what needs to happen now is about timing and about patience and about persistence. First of all, they must act in the interest of the DRC, not in personal interest, not in political interest. We know what happened when that is at the forefront of an agenda. It will fail again, and they will be back into a conflict zone. Now, one must remember, even the United Nations, with their MONUSCO deployments, peacekeeping missions, they also need to withdraw at one stage. And one must remember that the United Nations actually made that decision, and they would have been withdrawn by now in totality. But because of the conflicts that has happened between SAMI DRC and M23, they are still active and involved in the Eastern DRC. Amongst other South African soldiers are in the northern part of the North Kivu province, around Beni and further north. So timing is everything, and political objectives, personal political objectives must be secondary at the moment. That is the only way that you can get the buy-in from the neighboring countries and from the big UN nations like America. I think America and Qatar, who are playing major contributing roles to resolve this, will certainly have demands from their own as well. And that is part of this. So I don't think they will, and they should allow for the DRC to try to capture, their previous president at this stage, and they will have to provide immunity for him to return back to the DRC as well. Anyway.
All right. Well, let's find out if Guy, do you have anything to say as regards the former president Kabila as well?
No, not really. I think it's a bit of a distraction to be for the DRC government to be chasing him down. I think they need to rather focus on what's been happening in the past, but where the country is now and how they're going to get out of this mess. As Kobus has mentioned, the negotiating table is, I think, what should be the main focus.
Okay.
And Rwanda needs to be brought into this. I think that's the key piece of the puzzle here. The DRC government should be focusing.
Well, sorry about that. Speaking of Rwanda, you did say earlier that the DRC neighbors, were not being committed to the mission, and we know that this withdrawal process involves navigating through territories controlled by rebels. Now, Rwanda's foreign minister said that his country would provide safe passage for the retreating troops. How reliable is such a guarantee when Kigali is also accused of backing M23?
I think the Rwandans have gotten what they wanted, so they will, I'm pretty sure they will honor this agreement, because what Rwanda wanted was the SANDF forces out of the DRC, and they're achieving that. And they're also doing it in a manner that is quite embarrassing to the SADC countries, because the M23, they control Goma Airport, and they claim that the runway is unserviceable. But the main reason why they're not letting the SAMI-DRC forces leave by air is the M23 have been blocking the runway. They've parked vehicles across it. There's some minor damage that can be easily repaired. But the decision to get the SAMI-DRC forces to leave by road, I think, sort of adds to the humiliation and sort of sends a message that Rwanda and the M23 are getting their way. And it's also a bit of a warning to any future engagements. If there are any other forces that go in the future, they might face the same fate.
All right, now let's come back to you, Kobus. Kobus, the SADC, reaffirmed its commitment to supporting long-term peace efforts in the DRC. Now, how do you think, or how can they do this, post-withdrawal? Is that a possibility?
Well, I think all the regional groups have got a role to play, an active role to play, and the DRC is a member of SADC as well as the East African community. So in that regard, I think SADC must play a role, and my expectation would be from the immediate neighbors of the DRC to play a much more active role. I mean, they are much more directly affected by what happens in the DRC than what we are. One must remember that so many of that minerals that gets exported and transported by rail, some of them goes to the East African coast, to harbors there, but some are also going to via Zambia and Angola. So both are playing an active role, and one would expect for them the best would be to always promote negotiations and to have a proper agreement, and then obviously to have some support or guaranteed support from the biggest stakeholders like the United States, who will certainly benefit from that minerals and natural resources, to also protect their interest. And I've got little doubt that they will do that in some way. But I think the East African community countries and members have got a much bigger role to play, because they are so much closer to that eastern border area and the rich area, mineral-rich area of the eastern DRC. And they have got a much bigger responsibility than, for instance, SADC countries more south, like us in Zimbabwe and Botswana and Namibia. So hopefully that will happen, and I'm sure that should be part and would be part of the final agreements that for going forward. So yeah, that is the only way, because both in the DRC and the Eastern African community countries can benefit economically so much from proper development and orderly development and unearthing of that rich minerals. That they would benefit as well. And the moment that local population and ordinary people are benefiting either via jobs or other ways of income, then you will see that conflict starts to play a lesser and lesser role. But let's just remember, there are obviously certain actors who have got a serious interest in the conflict. And so there will always be risks involved, and that's why the negotiation part must be so strong and so watertight to keep those stakeholders or interest groups at bay, to assure the most probable, secure and safety situation in that area, especially for the local population.
Yeah. All right, well, with that, we would have to wrap up this conversation, but thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and also for speaking on this very important conversation. Kobus Marais, independent defense analyst, and Guy Martin, editor, Defense Web, both from Johannesburg, South Africa. We appreciate you for your time.
Thank you very much.